my humiliation for your amusement, I'm a little wrecked this morning. I inhaled my blood pressure pill. You're not supposed to inhale a blood pressure pill. Apparently, I thought I had taken it, and it stuck somewhere, and then when I took a deep breath, it came out. I mean, I got a big mouth. It could have hidden anywhere. I mean, it might have been hiding somewhere in Montana, for all I know. But it suddenly went down my throat, and as I'm choking to death, because that pill did unseemly things to my voice and my throat and my lungs are in open rebellion against my stupidity, all I thought was, though your blood pressure pill be small as a mustard seed, when it is inhaled, it grows to be as the largest plant in the garden, and you will feel like all the birds of heaven are nesting in your lungs. So bear with me. I'm going to do my best, but every once in a while my voice just goes, not that word. So we've been talking through our way through the Gospel of Mark, and I say this almost every time I get up. Our tendency in the way we read Gospels is to focus on a single story about Jesus, and then to look for a moral, look for it to speak in some way to our life, and then if we're lucky enough to have multiple versions of that same story in other Gospels, which are all written a little differently, we kind of collect all the facts together of that single story, and we put them in a big pile. John's facts and Luke's facts and Mark's facts and Matthew's facts all go into a big file called the facts of the event. Then we, thinking that we're armed with all the facts, recreate the story in our imagination. And then we preach that. But that's not the way Gospels were written. Each Gospel writer, writing to their own community, for their own purposes, told the reader of their book exactly what they wanted them to know. No more, no less. Mark has constructed his book around 21 narrative sermons. Now, a narrative sermon, we're not accustomed to narrative sermons. It's not the way we do things. We're Americans. We shoot straight. We walk in, we say, this is exactly what we think. This is what you ought to believe. Here's the 5 doctrinal points, 4 subpoints, 2 applications, and an offering. Always an offering. But that's not what they did. They told stories. And in those stories, the way that they wove those stories together was powerful messaging. You're meant to wrestle with those stories. You're meant to meditate on those stories. And they would take several events and put them together to make one big narrative sermon. Now we are going to look today at the 6th narrative sermon of the 21 narrative sermons that construct the Gospel of Mark. It is my favorite. If I'm allowed to have favorites, can we have favorites? It is my favorite. So what we're going to see in this collection of stories is going to be 6 stories. And in these 6 stories, there's going to be a pattern. Every story is going to follow the exact same pattern. Right? So again, how many of you are supposed to get one of these? I'm going to give you that pattern in a minute. So here it is. If you don't have it, it's right up here. An impossible situation is going to arise in someone's life. Experts are going to do everything that they can to deal with the problem and fail utterly. In the midst of this utter failure and utter hopelessness, somebody is going to come to Jesus. Often with bowing, falling prostrate before Jesus. That's an important part. They don't all bow at the same time, but at some point in all the stories, almost everybody is going to fall on their face before the Lord Jesus Christ. Jesus is going to solve their problem with a manifestation of divine power. This is not a chapter about sore knees. This is a chapter about the impossible, where the best that the humanity has to offer has come to nothing. And Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, incarnate deity, is going to manifest his deity by solving those problems in a divine fashion, almost all of them being connected to specific statements from the Old Testament that decree Yahweh, the Creator, to possess the power that Jesus is manifesting. You go on atheist sites and they'll go, if you read the Gospels, nowhere does Jesus say he's God. Nowhere do the Gospels say he's God. They always sound like that. We have to make them sound that way. Because if the atheist sounded like, hey, how you doing? We might be more tempted, but. But the truth is that the Gospels and Jesus declare him to be incarnate God again and again and again and again. It's just that they are Middle Easterners and we are Westerners. And so they don't do it like we would do it. What they're going to do is they're going to tell a story in which Jesus walks in the power of God from the Old Testament and blows the minds of every person who witnesses what he's done. After he has solved their problems with a manifestation of divine power, fear and awe are going to overwhelm those who have watched what he's done. Not just awe, fear. How terrifying. At one point, when it's not one of these stories, but it's the miracle catch, where Jesus has Peter, who's caught nothing all night fishing. He says, go out a little bit more, throw it over that side of the boat instead of that side of the boat. And he comes up with more fish than 2 boats can hold. And what is his response? Yay, lots of fish. No, he falls on his knees before Jesus and begs Jesus to go away. Because he is absolutely terrified that a person like him, with the sin that he knows is in his heart, has found himself standing before divine power. And he is terrified. Now, throughout this, we said there's going to be bowing, and faith is going to become central to every single story. And that's going to become important for us, because when we get to the end of this, I do not want you to hear this collection of stories in terms of, if I have faith, then I can get anything from God that I want. No. This chapter is not about your faith. It's about Jesus' power. This is not about what you can get from him. This is about what he has to offer the world because of who he is. Never confuse them. We've been building up through all our stories in which Jesus is being surrounded by different groups of people that he rejects. And one of the groups that he rejects are those people who are coming to him for what he can give them. Do we then think that we're going to have Mark preach an entire sermon about all the great things you can get from Jesus if only you believe hard enough? No. No, 1,000 times no. But let's begin. It's a long passage, so we're going to read through it. I'm going to point out some features in the story. I'm going to explain some background stuff. I'm going to tell you about some language stuff that's happening in the Greek text and in the Hebrew text that these are connected to. So bear with me. We got a fun ride ahead of us. On the day when evening came, he said to them, "Let us go over to the other side." Leaving the crowd, they took him along with them in the boat just as he was. That sounds like it's apropos of nothing, except what was the last sermon of Mark? The 5th sermon of Mark. What happened? Jesus has been ministering to all these crowds of people, and the crowds are getting bigger. His enemies are getting more violent. The crowds are getting more graspy. He has a boat set aside because they're trying to prevent him from teaching because they want miracles. But he's come to proclaim the truths of God, not to heal your sore knee. And so if they begin to interfere with his ability to teach, he is not going to let them. He has a boat set aside. The crowds get so much more grabby and bigger and more threatening that he actually gets in that boat and pushes out to shore so that nobody can interfere with his design to proclaim the truth of God to them. And then he shifts into a parable preaching pattern. Now, after he preaches all day to the crowds in parables, because remember, the people on the crowd are what? They're waiting for him to finish, because why are they there? They want a miracle touch. And so they're going to listen. So what is it in homeless soup kitchens and shelters? Thank you. It's always this: sermon then soup. Sermon then soup. You sit through the sermon, you get the soup. If you show up and just want the soup, sorry. Yeah, no soup for you. So he gets in a boat, and it says he preaches all day in parables. And then it says later when they were alone, his disciples came to him, and then the rest of the sermon happens. Well, when it says later when they were alone, when was that? After all of this. Because what he's going to do is, while he's still sitting in that boat, he's going to turn to his disciples, because everyone is expecting him. He's done teaching. He's going to row to shore, and then they're going to have the miracle service. But instead, he turns to his disciples and says, let's go to the other side. And they rowed away with him, just as he was. Now, if you sat through the whole sermon because you wanted the soup, how mad are you? So let us know from the beginning, this is not about your needs or your perceived needs. It's about his greatness and how worthy he is of your faith, how worthy he is of your hope, how worthy he is of your obedience. So they took him along with them in the boat just as he was, and other boats were with him. And there arose a fierce gale of wind, and the waves were breaking over the boat so much that the boat was already filling up. Jesus himself was in the stern, asleep on a cushion. Just for kicks, what does this remind you of from the Old Testament? What mighty man of God slept through a tremendous storm on a boat? Jonah. This is Mark's telling of this event. Jesus asleep in a boat, the storm comes, he can't resist. Mark is going to tell this whole story, and he's actually going to borrow elements of it from the story of Jonah. Jonah, the great prophet. Jonah, who was so upset at the mercy of God that he was fleeing away so that God couldn't make him preach repentance to the Ninevites. So God is going to waylay him and convince him he wants to turn around and go do what he was told to do. And he's going to send a great storm against the boat they're fleeing on. And the captain of the boat is going to come to him. He's going to speak to him. And Mark is about to quote that man as these disciples speak to Jesus. So here the storm is raging. These storms are very common. The way the mountains are shaped and the valleys are shaped, a storm can come up out of nowhere. Now the men who are rowing this boat, who are they? Are they newbies on the... No? Now, I'm not much of a boatman. I've been on a boat a handful of times. The last time I was on a boat, I learned the real soul of the meaning of a phrase. Small craft advisory. I discovered what a small craft advisory was. I'd always heard the words. I'd never lived it. We went out fishing on the sea off the coast of Rhode Island. It took us 20 minutes to get to our fishing spot and almost 4 hours to get back. The waves were going over our boat, over my head. The pump on the boat to try and keep the boat bailed out broke. My friend had to tie himself to the front of the boat to keep the boat from flipping up and over. So he's leaning over the front of the boat with his legs spread to balance it and hold the front down. And I'm making plans of how I'm going to get to shore instead of being swept out to sea when that thing goes over. I did not believe for 1 second we were going to make it back. Small craft advisory. But the guy that I was with, was a very experienced boatman. And he navigated us through small craft advisory. And he got us home. And he even said, that was a big stretch. That was really hard. He goes, I thought I was going to lose you guys. He didn't think he was going to lose himself. He had lots of experience. And so here we have a bunch of professional fishermen who fish on this lake every day of their lives, except on Sabbath. They've seen a lot of these storms. Matter of fact, there are going to be several storms throughout the Gospels, and most of them, they're just going to be fighting the wind, but not on this one. If you ever read Robinson Crusoe, it's a young man, he runs away from home, he takes a job on a sailboat, and the first night it is at sea, a terrible storm comes up, he's sick to his stomach, he's terrified he's going to die, he's running around screaming, and the sailors are like riding the ropes on the main mast. What are you yelling about? The storm! This isn't a storm! They're going up to the crow's nest, they're laughing at this little scaredy kid. A week later, a storm came up, and those men were crying out to God for their lives. He said, that's when I knew this was a bad storm. And so here we have these experienced fishermen. A storm has come up that is so severe that these experienced seamen have given up hope for their own lives and are going to come to Jesus and beg for his help. And they woke him and said to him, "Teacher, do you not care that we are perishing?" Now, this is the quote from the Greek of the story of Jonah. It's a manipulated quote because what the captain says, "Wake up, O sleeper. Cry out to your God. Perhaps he will care that we are perishing." Only God shifts in the story. The captain says to Jonah, "Cry out to your God. Perhaps he will care that we are perishing." And in the mouth of the disciples on this boat, they turn to Jesus and say, "Do you not care that we are perishing? Do not miss the mark." Jesus has just been made not only to play the role of the great prophet Jonah, but to play the role of God in the story. He is God. "Do you not care that we are perishing?" And he got up and he rebuked the wind and said to the sea, "Hush, be still." He just quoted Psalm 107, in which when sailors go out to sea and the terrible storms come and their lives are in danger and they are just a breath from going down into the depths of the sea to their doom, and they cry out to God in their terror, and God says to the wind, "Hush," and to the sea, "Be still." And he has just quoted the psalm. But here it is Yahweh. It is not Yahweh from the heavens speaking, but it is Jesus from the boat. He is playing the role of God in the psalm. "Hush, be still." And the wind died down and it became perfectly calm. And he said to them, "Why are you afraid? How is it that you have no faith?" Like, what are you all freaked out about? Don't you know who's in the boat with you? Do you think anything is going to happen here that I don't want to happen? Don't you even have a clue of the true nature of the person with whom you are rowing? They do not, in truth, have a full understanding. They will get one. And he said to them, "Why are you so afraid? How is it that you have no faith?" And they became very much afraid and said to one another, "Who then is this, that even the wind and the sea obey him?" It is Yahweh, the creator of all from the Old Testament, who has command over the wind and the sea. And it is Jesus in this boat who exercises that power. Now, there's another drama here from the book of Jonah. Now, in the book of Jonah, Jonah's running away from God, and he gets in the boat. And he goes in the bowels of the boat, and he goes to sleep. But then God sends a storm on the sea to try and get their attention. And the sailors begin to fight to save their own lives. But no matter what they do, the storm gets worse and worse. They are very afraid of the storm. And they come and they wake up Jonah, and they say, "Cry out to your gods, see who is perishing." And they say, "We got to find out what's going on. This is not normal storm stuff. This is something special. We need to find out what this is about." And so they do this thing that pagans would do, is they cast lots. And God's up in heaven going, "I'm going to make the lots point to Jonah." And so all the lots point to Jonah, and they turn to him and say, "All right, buddy, fess up. How are you responsible for this?" And he goes, "All right, you got me. You got me. I serve Yahweh, the God of heaven, the maker of the sea and the dry land. And I'm going to put words in their mouth, if you'll allow me to put words in their mouth. You are running away from the God of heaven who made the wind and the sea in a boat? Are you a special kind of stupid? Where do you think this is going to go?" And when they found out this situation, they become very afraid. And Jonah says to them, "Look, if you want to save your lives, you got to throw me out of the boat. It'll kill him. You're in the middle of the Mediterranean. You're dead. Just throw me out of the boat. God will kill me and you guys will be spared." But they don't want to do that because he has just manifested a connection to the most powerful God that they have ever witnessed. And they don't want to kill his prophet. So they're fighting for all of their life. They start throwing stuff overboard. Nothing happens. Finally, he just keeps telling him, I'm telling you, pitch me overboard. Pitch me overboard. So they take him and they pitch him overboard. When you read the second chapter of Jonah, you find out what happened when they pitch him overboard. But for this moment, they pitch him overboard, and he's gone. And immediately the storm stops. They were afraid of the storm. They were terrified when they found out that they were fighting a storm being sent by the God of heaven, who made the sea and the dry land because of a disobedient prophet that was on their boat. But when they witnessed the power of this God to instantaneously stop the storm, the minute Jonah disappears from the waves, they become unhinged with terror. These men are afraid of this storm, but they are terrified of the man who can command it. And that's a Jonah play. They're not playing. This is exactly how Mark is telling the story. All right, next one. So what do we have? Impossible situation. A storm beyond anything that these guys have seen. The experts have done their best and failed. Professional fishermen, professional seamen have given up hope of life. Someone comes to Jesus. Lord, do you not care that we're perishing? Jesus solves the problem with manifestations of divine power. Hush. Still. Fear and awe overwhelm them. They are terrified and say, who then is this that even the wind and the sea obey him? And Jesus and faith and bowing are taking place. Why are you so afraid? Have you no faith? Don't you know who's in the boat with you? Now we come to the second story. They came to the other side of the sea, into the country of the Gerasenes. And he got out of the boat, and immediately a man from the tombs with an unclean spirit met him. And he had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one was able to bind him anymore, even with a chain, because he had been bound with shackles and the chains had been torn apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces, and no one was strong enough to subdue him. Constantly, night and day, he was screaming among the tombs and in the mountains and gashing himself with stones. Impossible situation. A man so demonized that all the experts who have bound him with chains, tried to confine him because of his violence, have failed. Nobody's strong enough. No chain is strong enough. Nothing can hold this man. The experts have done their best and failed. Seeing Jesus from a distance, he ran up and bowed down before him. And shouting out with a loud voice, he said, what business do we have to do with each other? Jesus, Son of the Most High God, I implore you by God, do not torment me. For he had been saying to him, come out of the man, you unclean spirit. And he was asking him, what is your name? And he said to him, my name is Legion, for we are many. And he began to implore him earnestly not to send them out of the country. Have you noticed the flip-flop between the one and the many? The he and the them and the we and the us this is a very confusing type of speech. This man has become so demonized, so full and so given over wholly to demonic power that you've got him, and then you've got the forces that are controlling over him, tormenting him, wrecking his life. And this exchange that's taking place, and he bows before Jesus. Now there was a large herd of swine feeding nearby on the mountain. The demons implored him, saying, send us into the swine so that we may enter them. Jesus gave them permission. And coming out, the unclean spirits entered the swine, and the herd rushed down the steep bank into the sea, about 2,000 of them, and they were drowned in the sea. 2,000 pigs for many thousands of spirits that had gained access to this man's soul, access to this man's life. And Jesus drives them out by what? Oh, I didn't do that loud enough. Come out! Oh, they didn't come out. I better yell louder. What muscle do you flex to drive out a demon? That's not what he does. There's no screaming, there's no yelling, there's no hollering, there's no whoop-de-whoop-de-whoop-de-woo. He simply gives them permission. Now, what we have in the Old Testament is a prophecy in the book of Zechariah that says that when God comes to the land, when God comes among the people, he will drive the demonic spirits out. This is the promise. Now, as far as demon casting and the dealing with demonic forces. Now, some of you here have perhaps maybe never seen things in the spirit realm. Maybe you've never seen the angelic, maybe you've never seen the demonic. No, I do not have a deliverance ministry. I don't run around all the time doing this kind of stuff. But for once, if you have seen into that realm, it will leave you marked forever. And I have seen things that would make your hair fall out. Obviously. I have seen it, and I have not been unmarked by seeing it and touching it. But Jesus comes, and in the full manifestation of the promises from the book of Zechariah, he comes in, and he drives them out by giving them permission. This is the most passive, aggressive, non-up-your-nose-with-a-rubber-hose statement that I've ever seen in comparison to the way most of us imagine this is supposed to go with the screaming and the yelling. Now, let me ask you a question. In the Old Testament, are there any exorcists in the Old Testament? One. Anybody know who he is? David. When Saul falls against the Lord, and the Lord takes his Holy Spirit that he had given him to help him rule, to guide him in his governance of the people of Israel, God takes his Holy Spirit away from him. And a demonic spirit comes to torture the soul of Saul. They bring David in, and David comes to him. And David brings his musical instruments, and he worships the Lord in the presence of Saul and drives these demonic spirits out of Saul. But Saul, being the man that he is, he's constantly opening himself back up to them. And they are always coming back, and so they're constantly getting David to come back and do it again. It's the only exorcism in the Old Testament. Now David's son has come, and he is God in the flesh, and he is driving the demons from the land by saying he gave them permission. Their herdsmen ran away. Okay, this is a statement of fear. Reported it in the city, in the country, and the people came to see what it was that had happened. They came to Jesus and observed the man who had been demon-possessed, sitting down, clothed and in his right mind, the very man who had had the legion, and they became frightened. They were afraid of the demon-possessed man who could break chains and overpower them all, who could not be restrained, and wailed through the mountains, screaming out in torment and terror, night and day, gashing himself with stones over the inner torment that he could not handle. But they are absolutely terrified of the one who can command those spirits to go by giving them permission. Those who had seen it described to them how it had happened and the demon-possessed man and all about the swine, and they began to implore him to leave their region. Get out of here. If I saw this, I would like to think that my response would be, would you be my mentor? Would you disciple me? But their response is, go away. Get out of here. They're terrified of this guy. They began to implore him to leave their region, and he was getting into the boat. He's like, all right, you want me to go? He's getting into the boat. The man who had been demon-possessed was imploring him that he might accompany him. This man has been delivered from a life of torment, a life of torture that no doubt he caused himself by whatever the behavior was that he was engaging in that allowed him to become such a hallway for the demonic. And he's begging Jesus to come with him. This is like the worst case of discipleship in the world. I'm going to drive 2,000 spirits out of you, and then I'm going to leave you here. It's like, no. But he wants to come, but Jesus is not going to let him for a very specific reason. These people are so terrified of Jesus, they want him to leave. But he's not done with them. He's going to go because they've asked him to go, but he's not done with them. Something has to change in their hearts, but he's not done with them. He did not let him, but he said to him, pay attention. Remember we had the switcho with the call upon your God. Perhaps he will care that you are perishing. And then it says, do you not care that switch out for God, for Jesus? It's going to happen again. go to your people and report to them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he had mercy on you. And he went away and began to proclaim in Decapolis, that's 10 major cities run by pagan kings. Go into and proclaim in Decapolis what great things. And he went away and began to proclaim in Decapolis what great things Jesus had done for him. Jesus says, go and tell them all the great things the Lord, the God of heaven, has done for you. And he went out and told them all the great things Jesus had done for them. That is not an accident. Jesus is switched out and made to play the role of God. And everyone was amazed. This is the kind of amazement that leaves you dumb, not stupid, silent. This is the kind of amazement that shakes you to your core. Your entire perception of reality is unhinged. You once thought you had a good handle on what the world was and what the nature of your existence was, but your encounter with this man has utterly and completely shattered every illusion you ever had about the nature of your life. And they are undone by it. Impossible situation. A man with a legion of demons. The experts have done their best and failed. They tied him with chains. They tried to overpower him. He could break every shackle, break every chain, overpower every man. Someone comes to Jesus, the man himself, in the midst of his torment, driven about here and there by these demonic forces, comes to Jesus seeking help, while the demons inside of him themselves are rebelling against the action. And Jesus, in a manifestation of divine power, from the book of Zechariah and from the typology of him being the son of David, who was the only exorcist in the Old Testament, gives them permission to go. And the legion is gone. And the response is fear and terror. And this is the man. Who's the first apostle? This guy. The first apostle. Who's the second apostle? The woman at the well. Long before the 12 disciples become apostles of the Lord, these two people are sent. And because of this man's testimony, the next time Jesus comes to this region, they welcome him with open arms. And he has a powerful ministry among them. But we'll talk about that when we get to Sermon 8. Jairus' difficulty. So they're going to come on back. Now, when Jesus had crossed over, I hope everybody's with me. This is a long text. I want you to see the sermon. I want you to hear the message. And when we get down to the very last story, the whole thing's going to just go nuclear on us. Just stay with me. Follow us. When Jesus had crossed over again in the boat to the other side, a large crowd gathered around him. And so he stayed by the seashore. Again, this massive crowd of people clutching and grabbing. He can't even go into the city. He's got to stay out by the seashore where there's enough room for them to be able to come and sit and him to be able to talk to them. One of the synagogue officials named Jairus came up and on seeing him fell at his feet. Remember I told you, he's going to be bowing. All right. He fell at his feet and implored him earnestly, saying, "My little daughter is at the point of death. Please come and lay your hands on her so that she will get well and live." And he went off with him, and a large crowd was following him and pressing in on him. Now, I've been through the city streets of most of these villages. I've been in right where they are actually standing. And anytime you get into a city environment where the town is, the streets are really narrow. It's shocking how narrow they are. And we would come, especially when we were in Jerusalem, there were 6 of us that were hanging around together. There were 30 on our team. 6 of us had become pals. And we were going to this one stretch, and it was just this road and all the shops. And it was so packed with people, there was no way we were getting through. And so one person held my belt. Somebody held their belt, and we made a chain. And then I hit the crowd. Boom. Pushing my way through the crowd, people flying everywhere. While we're doing this, we ran into Jerry Farwell. He's coming the other way doing the same thing with his cameraman. We go, "How you doing?" He's going, "Good, good. Well, bye, see ya." And then we went on. That was it. Jerry Farwell is a very famous preacher. He's huge, by the way. Or was huge. He's passed on. He was giant. I never knew he was so big. He didn't look that big on TV. But he was really big. It was tough to get through these roads. Okay, now, is this an impossible situation? A sick girl? No, it's a sick girl. Maybe she'll get better. Maybe she won't, but it's not impossible. But what mission are we on? This is a series of stories that are mission impossible. If you ever see the second Mission Impossible movie with, what's his face? Tom Cruise. His boss calls him up. Says, I got a mission for you. And he tells him what the mission is. He tells him what the mission is. Tom Cruise's character, who is Ethan Hunt? Ethan Hunt. He goes, it'll be difficult. And his boss goes, well, this is Mission Impossible. Difficult should be a walk in a park. So here's Jesus. He's just been handed Mission Difficult. And he's looking for Mission Impossible. But he's going to go off with him anyway. And this story just kind of hovers there because we're not done with it yet. We're not done with the story yet. And he just goes off, and he's moving through this city element that's like that crushing, the pushing, the shoving, the tightness of the people. And a woman who had a hemorrhage for 12 years. This is an actual known illness, by the way. It is devastating. It is one of those kinds of devastating things that just wears you down to nothing until you're scarcely a human being. It bleeds you of all your strength, all your energy, leaves you susceptible to a dozen different types of illnesses that come in to wreck your world because of the damage to your immune system that this initial disease does to you. And she had endured much at the hands of many physicians and had spent all that she had and was not helped at all, but rather had grown worse. And after hearing about Jesus, she came up in the crowd behind him and touched his cloak. For she thought, if I just touch his garments, I'll get well. Immediately, the flow of her blood was dried up, and she felt in her body that she was healed of her affliction. The impossible situation. 12 years in an illness that nobody has a cure for. Every doctor that she's ever known has done everything in their power to help her. She spent everything that she has, and they have failed. She's only gotten worse. Then she comes to Jesus. She says to herself, if I only touch his garment. Now, this is not an accident, by the way. In the ancient world, my second master's thesis was on garment imagery in the ancient Near East. I know, sounds like a page turner. It actually is. It really, if I can say so myself, I think it's pretty good. The hem of the outer garment. So these guys would wear what the clothes they were going to wear. They always had this outer garment they would wear. And the hem of that outer garment had a very powerful imagery in the ancient world. It was the symbolic mystical extension of the individual in worship before his God. That hem was kind of like a family crest. It was individualized if you were wealthy. I promise you, the poor people probably did not have these or didn't have much of them. But if you were a wealthy person, you made the hem on your garment royal, rich. You wanted everybody to see who you are. That hem said who you were. And it was intimately connected to your connection to your God. So that when David in the cave sneaks up on Saul, who's trying to kill him, and instead of killing him like his men urge him to, cuts off the hem of his garment, and then has his conscience smitten because he's done it. It's not like, oh, he's so sensitive in his conscience. He just cut his robe and he feels bad about it. He went for the seat of power. He delivered a image to Saul. I have cut you off from the protective power of God. And his conscience smites him that he's done this. Now, these hems would be used all kinds of ways. In Numbers chapter 15, they're given tassels, and those tassels are symbols of priesthood, and they attach them to their hems. They are all priests of God. They are considered a position of power. So among the pagan world, if they wanted to cast a demon out of you, they would do incantations over the hem of your garment. If you were married, your wife would have a hem that matched yours. And if you divorced her, you would either take the garment away or you would rip the hem right off it to decree that she is no longer under your protection, no longer part of your covenant community, no longer to receive anything from you. If your son is such a rotten pig that you want to undo him, you take his garment away. And he no longer has the symbol and the sign of being under your protection. Kings would take their kings, because they were rich, they had a lot of garments, and they would send outer garments to different places and temples, and they would do incantations over the garment, over the hem of the garment for the protection of the king. This is pagan world, not Bible world. but there's always this bleed over in the symbolism. If you went up to a person and you threw yourself on your knees before them and you seized under the hem of their garment, they were expected to give you whatever you needed if it was in your power to give it. So Ruth goes to the threshing floor and she wants to ask Boaz to marry her. So she takes the hem of his garment and she folds it over so that his feet get cold, and he wakes up and he says, spread your hem over me. Make me yours. Bring me under the covenant protection of your house. And now this woman, she's going to come and she's going for the hem. Now, in the book of Malachi, there's this statement, and it's about the Messiah. And it says, when the Son of Righteousness, not S-O-N, S-U-N, the Son of Righteousness rises, there will be healing in its wings. And its wings are the hem, but the wings are also the wispy little edges of the sun, the rays of the sun. But this is a man who's coming, a Savior who's coming to the people. And when he rises, there will be healing in his hem. So one of two things is happening in this story. This woman believes that Jesus is Messiah, and she is coming to him. And she's going to go for the seat of power. If he is Messiah, there will be healing in his hem. Or she plans to come up to him, believing that he has the power to heal her, to seize upon the hem of his garment and to ask for healing. But instead, she gets a whap like she never expected. Now, the text is going to be important. I'm going to talk about a grammar piece here. One of two things, but pay attention, they're both important. This is either a great statement of her faith that he is Messiah and therefore will have healing there, or she simply believes that he is a man of great power and that if she seizes his hem, she can ask for healing and he will give it. Now, in the next chapter, we're going to have a whole bunch of people that come to Jesus, and everyone is going to ask permission to seize upon the hem of his garment. And when they do, they will be healed. That's the next one. But in this one, we're just left wondering. But she gets more than she bargained for. She gets healed. I think she went to ask a question and she got a healing. Immediately, Jesus, perceiving in himself that the power proceeding from him had gone forth. Ooh, that's wonderful in the Greek, by the way. This is not a statement that Jesus perceived that his power went out. That's not what it says. In Greek, it says that the from him power went out. The from him power went out. What does that mean? That is a very clear statement. The from him is the adjective that is describing the power. That the power that emanates from who he is, by the very nature of who he is as God in the flesh, that power that is there, natural to him by the greatness of his person, someone made contact with it and it went out. I'm in a bank once and there's a little kid and he's playing with his mother's keys and he's trying to stick her keys in the light socket while she's filling out checks. And she's going like this. Stop it. And he goes to put the key in the socket. Stop it. He looks at her. Goes to put the key in the socket. She goes, stop it. And she goes, oh, fine, go ahead. And she walks away to leave this kid to put the key in the light socket. Had I not intervened in some type of a verbal, what in the world do you think you're doing, woman? He probably would have done it and would have gotten something not quite as healing as what she gets. There's power there in that outlet. It's there. And all you got to do is touch it. But it's not like you touch it for your selfishness, because nothing in this is selfishness. But he felt that the power, the from him power, the power that is his by the very nature of the greatness of who he is, somebody made the kind of contact with it that it answers, that he answers. And power flowed out of him into her at the very touch. And she is instantaneously made well. And he turned around in the crowd and said, who touched my garments? What's the nature of the situation? They're bumping him and shoving him, and they're driving their way through a crowd, and they're trying to get to Jairus' house because his daughter is sick and near death. And at this moment, when Jesus going to Jairus' house, to get there before this difficult situation becomes impossible, because once she dies, what else is there to do? Jesus suddenly stops and goes, hey, who touched me? And the disciples were like, everyone? The whole kit and caboodle? Every single person on this street? Let's touch you. What are you talking about? Who touched my garments? And his disciples said to him, you see the crowd pressing in on you, and you say, who touched me? And he looked around to see the woman who had done this. But the woman, what's she? Fearing and trembling, aware of what had happened to her, came and fell down before him and told him the whole truth. And he said to her, daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace and be healed of your affliction. Now let me ask you a question. It's a tricky question. Did her faith make her well? Yes and no. What actually healed her? The from him power that went forth is what healed her. So at what point does her faith make her well? What does faith do for us? Faith is not a power. Faith is not a power. God did not use faith to create the world. Faith is not this substance that if we have it, we can make the world our oyster, and we can make creation dance for us because we have this thing called faith. Faith is nothing more than belief. Now, what if she would come through that crowd having the same exact faith and grab the hem of Judas? Did she get anything? No. Misplaced faith. Her faith has driven her to the wrong person, to believe the wrong things, to do the wrong things, and to get nothing for it. But her faith is well placed. Faith is what energizes you to act. Faith is what drives you forward to ask. Faith is what keeps you in the game when everything looks impossible. Faith is what makes you cry out to God for help. Faith is what makes you trust yourself into his hand, and by trusting yourself in his hand, to reap the rewards of being a trusting servant of the living God. That is the power of faith and nothing else. Her faith made her well because her faith was well placed in God, in the God-man who had come, who has divine power flowing through him. And it drove her to him, to trust him, and to touch him. What's Jairus doing right now? Excuse me, Jesus, what part of near death were you not quite getting? Why are we stopping here? My daughter, she's just up the road. Come on, why are we standing here dealing with this woman? She's healed, great, congratulations, let's move. And Jesus, now has Jesus ever done this before? In the Gospel of John, he does this. He's told that Lazarus is sick and near death. And he's like, yeah, let's hang out for 4 more days. Why are we hanging out for 4 more days? Because I need him to be good and dead. Because I am going to show you real power. I am going to show you that I am the resurrection and the life. And I'm going to show you mission impossible, not mission difficult. And so he stays with her. And we move on. We're almost done. While he was still speaking, they came from the house of the synagogue official, saying, your daughter has died. Why trouble the teacher anymore? But Jesus, overhearing what was being spoken, said to the synagogue official, do not be afraid any longer. Only believe. That's faith. Faith is what keeps you in the game when everything looks impossible because you believe in the one who does the impossible. He recognizes that his man has been pushed beyond what his faith would take him, and so Jesus gives him some advice. Stay in the game because you're talking to the worker of great miracles. You're talking to the doer of the impossible. You're talking to the one who commands the wind and the sea. You're talking to the one who can drive out the legion by giving them permission. You're talking to the one who has divine power flowing in him, that when someone makes a contact of true faith and trust in who he is, reaps all the benefits of that power. Hang in, believe, commit yourself to the way, stay in the game. And he allowed no one to accompany him except Peter and James and John, the brother of James. And he came to the house of the synagogue official, and he saw a commotion and people loudly weeping and wailing. And entering in, he said to them, why make a commotion and weep? The child has not died, but is asleep. He has just quoted the book of Daniel, by the way. He has spoken of the hope in Israel that all those who die in faith will see the living God. That all those who die in faith will someday be resurrected to live forevermore in his presence. Not some heavenly floating on a cloud with a harp and a halo. I went a harp. If you wear your harp on your head, that's probably why you play so badly. All right, a halo and harp. Gold just does not bring out my complexion, so I don't know what I'm going to do. This is the kind of eternal, it's a resurrected world. It's a new earth, a new heaven, life before him, before revealed God. And all he has done is quoted the great hope of the people of Israel. Why are you weeping and wailing so uproariously? The child is not dead. She is just asleep. And they're weeping and wailing. Now, if you've not seen mourning rituals in the Middle East or the ancient Near East, it is something to behold. Wailing and screaming and taking ashes and dumping them on your head and dirt and dumping them on your head, grabbing your garments and tearing them, beating yourself in the side of the head, plucking hair from the side of your head. And there's a whole, if you ever want a whole thing behind the mourning rituals of the ancient Near East, powerful stuff, but I don't have time for it right now. But it's in my master's thesis on garment imagery in the world when we talk about the ripping of the garments. All right, but be that as it may. So, but the second he says this, they go from to mocking and laughing. They began laughing at him. Why? Because a lot of this is put on. You could actually hire mourners to come to the funeral of people to cry out and wail and scream. And if anybody's ever read the book Oliver Twist, as a child, this is his job. He's very good at the weeping and the crying and the wailing. And so when children died, they would hire him to go before the caskets, weeping and wailing. And people would be moved by the pity of this child weeping and wailing for his friend, and they would give more donations. More donations to the weeping and grieving family. So I'm in Israel, right around the time that we ran into Jerry Falwell, and I go into the place where Jesus was crucified. And if you go to see it, it's like a big hill, and it's got a church over it. So it's like dead, because it never gets any sunlight. But there's the hill, and there's this big slab of stone, which they claim is the one that his body was laid on. I'd have to look at the history of that stone, but be that as it may, they created the scene. And these people from all over the world are there, and they're wailing and weeping. And there's this one woman. It's a whole group of Italian women. Another Italian, because they're screaming in Italian. And they're on the rock, they're on the ground, and they're on the stone, and they're taking the tears from their eyes as they're wailing and wailing. And then some of them are pulling a hair out. Some of them are screaming and bumped in the heads and wiping their tears on the stone where the body of Jesus lay. And a man comes up to the woman and kicks her foot. And she looks up at him, and he goes, he has to make gestures because it's so loud in there from all the screaming and wailing. You couldn't do it. And she immediately goes, in Italian, and he goes, and he walks away. And then she goes like this. I went, that was fast. So putting them all out, he took along the child's father and mother and his own companions, and he entered the room where the child was. Taking the child by the hand, he said to her, Talitha kum. I love Mark's translation of this, which translated means, little girl, I say to you, get up. Oh, that is very flowery. This is what he just said. Pay attention to the Aramaic. Talitha kum. Girl, up. 2 words. Girl, up. There is no, oh, sweet child of mine, light of the morning dew. No. Girl, up. Immediately, their girl got up and began to walk, for she was 12 years old. Now, I suppose they have to make sure that we understand this, that it was not a second miracle. You know, you heard the person who goes to the doctor and they're going in for surgery, They go, doctor, after surgery, will I be able to play the saxophone? Doctor said, I see no reason why you will not be able to play the saxophone beautifully even after the surgery. And she says, good. I've never wanted to bother taking lessons. This is not a second miracle in which a child who could not walk can suddenly walk. But she's 12 years old. She gets up. Now, the fact that she's mentioned that she's 12 kind of plays with the idea that the woman was how many years in her sickness? 12. Is 12 a significant number in Scripture? Yes. 12 tribes of Israel, his 12 disciples. They worked 12s on purpose, but let's leave all that aside. And immediately they were completely astounded. Is that the understatement of the year? Someone walked up to your dead daughter and said, girl, up. And she pops up like a jack-in-a-box. Woo! That was a good rest. They are completely astounded. Whatever it is they thought about this miracle man. Another Elijah who has contact with God and can pray for healing. When Elijah raises the dead boy, and the same thing with the other one, they pray and ask God to do something for this child. And God listens to their prayers and does it. But this is the man who commands death, and it rolls back. The scriptures say only God has command over the day of one's death. And Jesus, God in the flesh, incarnate deity, walks into this little girl's life, walks into this family's life, and says, girl, up. And she is up. And their minds are unseated. They are astounded. They are blown away. Now let me ask you a question. Are any of these stories promises that if you serve Jesus, your loved ones will not die and will get resurrected? Is it a promise that every single thing that ever goes wrong with your body will be instantly healed? No. I know partly of this because I almost choked to death on a blood pressure pill this morning by inhaling it into my lungs, which are now shredded. No. These are about Jesus. And these are about his worth. And these are about you trusting him with yourself, trusting him with your children, trusting him with your life. Whatever happens, you're with him. Whatever happens, you are his. And he gave them strict orders that no one should know about this. And he said that something should be given her to eat. Can you understand why he would not want people to hear about this? Because he's having a big enough problems with selfish-seeking crowds as it is. If they got word that that guy could raise up people and had command over the day of death, he would never have enough peace to eat another meal again. He's got other things that he's about. Now we come to this. That's 5 stories, all woven together in impossible situations. Experts have done their best and failed. Jesus is sought. He solves the issue in divine fashion with a manifestation of divine power, and everybody is astounded. And throughout it all, they bow to him. They switch him out for God. They fulfill the Old Testament promises about what God does when God is present. But what's the last story? Because in this story, it's going to turn on us. I've talked about, we've done this before when we did the one about the enemies of Jesus, controversial Christ. We're in the first 5 stories, it goes a certain way, and the last one turns everything on its head. And so we're about to turn this entire situation on its head. I apologize for the length, but we're almost done. And Jesus went out from there and came to his hometown. And his disciples followed him. And when the Sabbath came, he began to teach in the synagogue. And many listeners were astonished, saying, where did this man get these things? And what is this wisdom given to him? And such miracles as these that are performed by his hand. Is not this the carpenter, the son of Mary, and the mother of James, the brother of James and Jose and Judas and Simon? Are not his sisters here with us? And they took offense at him. I used to change that guy's diaper. Who does he think he is, all uppity and in my face, coming here, telling me he's something special? What is all this weird stuff we hear about all that he's got going on? I remember when he broke my favorite teacup. Of course, he miraculously put it back together again, but hey, I made that part up. Okay. And Jesus said to them, a prophet is not without honor, except in his hometown and among his own relatives and in his own household. I'm sitting one night. Now, it's not a... 3 of my children, when they went to college, were sucked away by critical Marxism. Completely sucked away. My youngest was not. She had somehow, in her relationship with the world, she stayed true to her faith. She stayed true to the Lord. She resisted the temptations toward the critical Marxism that they were pounding her with. And so we're sitting around, and I say to her, Lakin, what did I do right with you that I did wrong with the others? And she said, oh, Dad, don't do that to yourself. You didn't do anything right with me. I am resistant to all these things because of my 5th grade social studies teacher who taught me the Constitution. She goes, yeah, I know. To everybody else, you're Dr. Sargent. But around here, it's just wah, 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 wah. I'm literally sitting here feeling about this big. That's great. Nobody is without honor except in their own town with their own family. We know you. Who do you think you are? But here's the big thing. And he could do no miracle there except that he laid his hands on a few sick people and healed them. And he wondered at their unbelief. What's the flip, though? We have an impossible situation, but this is Jesus' impossible situation. He can command the sea when professional sailors have completely given up hope of saving themselves. He commands nature itself. He casts out a legion of demons by simply giving them permission. He accidentally heals a woman by the sheer greatness of the power that's flowing out of him. He commands death to roll back, and it obeys him. And he comes to his own town and can do nothing. Nothing. This is not a story or sermon about us, exactly. It's a sermon about him. And he has finally found his impossible situation. People like to be smart alecks, and they ask absurd questions like, can God make a rock he can't lift? If you say God can do anything, can God make a rock he can't pick up? And my favorite answer is not a technical one, which is, don't ask an absurdity and expect any kind of an answer. You've created a question that has no answer, so shut up. Ask me a better question. No. My favorite answer is somebody went, well, he made you. You are the rock that God can't lift because he has decreed that you would be free to choose. You would be given the freedom to live your life, to believe or not believe, trust or not trust. And he will, under no circumstances, override that freedom, even if it means that you choose the path to hell. He will give you your way. But if you will trust him, he who can command the wind and the sea, he who casts out the legions and drives back the forces of hell with a whew, he who heals by the sheer greatness of the divine power that is in him, he who has command over death itself, if you will commit your way to him, anything is possible. If you like what you're hearing today, please subscribe below, and don't forget to share it on as many platforms as you can, and tell your friends to watch. Thank you.